In the quiet temple, the Master Keiko's voice broke the silence, a sharp declaration that cut through the Thomas's very being. "You have strayed from the path," the Master said. "Your mind is clouded, and your soul adrift." Thomas stood frozen, heart racing, feeling a cold shiver run through him. Was it true? Had his journey been in vain? Every meditation session had felt hollow, each breath a reminder of his inner emptiness. For years he had searched for answers, grasping at teachings, trying to find peace. Yet, all he found was frustration, as if something vital was missing. Thomas's hands trembled as he clutched his robe. How could it be that everything he had worked toward was now meaningless? The Master's calm eyes met his, unblinking, unwavering. "You are lost because you are not willing to surrender," the Master continued. "Only when you let go of the false will you find the truth." Thomas's chest tightened. Surrender? Could he truly let go of everything he believed in? Thomas retreated to his quarters, each step heavier than the last. The weight of the Master's words lingered, echoing in his mind. "You have strayed from the path." They seemed to hang in the air, a constant reminder of his failure. His heart was a chaotic mess of doubt and confusion. He had come to the temple to seek peace, to find enlightenment, but now he wasn't sure if he even understood what that meant. In his mind, the meditation techniques were supposed to bring clarity. Yet, each time he sat in silence, he only found frustration. What was I supposed to be doing? His thoughts spiraled, only deepening his sense of isolation. The quiet of his room, so familiar, now felt like a suffocating weight. He closed his eyes, trying to focus, but the noise inside his head only grew louder. How can I find peace if I don't even know what peace feels like? The next morning, the temple grounds felt more suffocating than usual. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Thomas stood outside the meditation hall, looking out at the distant mountains, their peaks barely visible through the morning mist. He had come here seeking peace, yet with each day, he found himself slipping further from it. As he stepped inside the hall, the Master Keiko's presence seemed to fill the space, as vast and as deep as the stillness itself. She was already seated, her eyes closed, as though she had been waiting for him all along. "Come," she said, her voice as calm as the wind that rustled the bamboo outside. "Your journey does not end with one step, nor with 1,000. It ends with a single breath." Thomas's chest tightened, his thoughts scattering like fallen leaves. A single breath. What did that mean? As he sat across from her, trying to clear his mind, his thoughts only grew louder. The weight of his expectations crushed him, but the Master Keiko's serene presence remained, unmoving and unwavering. "Let go of everything," she whispered, "even the need to find peace." The next few days passed in a blur for Thomas. Despite his attempts, his mind refused to quiet. Each time he meditated, his thoughts swirled in endless circles, dragging him further into frustration. One afternoon, as he wandered the temple grounds, he saw a fellow disciple, Emma, sitting by the koi pond. She was a 30-year-old woman, her face calm and serene, her eyes closed in quiet meditation. Emma had been at the temple for years, a model disciple of the Zen way. She radiated peace in a way that Thomas could never understand. He sat next to her, unsure of what to say. She opened her eyes and smiled, a knowing look in her gaze. "It's hard, isn't it?" she said softly. "The search for peace is not a destination. It's the journey itself." Thomas stared at the pond, watching the koi swim effortlessly through the water. Could it really be that simple? The idea lingered in his mind, but it felt so distant, so far removed from the chaos he felt inside. "You must stop seeking it," Emma continued. "Peace cannot be grasped, it must be allowed to flow through you." Later that day, Thomas returned to the meditation hall, his mind more scattered than ever. The quiet of the hall only made his restlessness more apparent. He sat cross-legged on his cushion, trying to breathe deeply, but every inhale felt forced. He closed his eyes, focusing on the sensation of his breath, but it was no use. The thoughts came crashing in. relentless and unforgiving. What am I doing wrong? The question echoed in his mind. A faint sound caught his attention, a soft, rhythmic tapping. He opened his eyes to see the Master Keiko standing at the door of the hall, a gentle smile on her face. Without a word, she stepped inside, her presence filling the room. "Thomas," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "You cannot find peace through force. Peace is not something you chase. It is something you allow. You are caught in your own expectations, your own desire to control. Let go." Her words struck him like a gong, reverberating through his chest. "Let go," he repeated to himself, the weight of those two words sinking in. Maybe the answer wasn't in trying harder. Maybe it was in surrendering. Thomas sat cross-legged in the meditation hall, his hands resting gently on his knees. The Master Keiko's words echoed in his mind, but the stillness that surrounded him felt suffocating rather than peaceful. His thoughts swirled, relentless and chaotic. Each time he focused on his breath, the noise inside his head grew louder. What was I doing wrong? He asked himself. He felt as though he was failing at something he should already understand. His heart raced as frustration began to bubble up. It had been weeks since the Master Keiko had asked him to let go, yet nothing seemed to change. His mind remained clouded, and no amount of focus seemed to quiet the storm inside. The air around him was thick with expectation, but it only added to the weight in his chest. The Master Keiko's calm presence in the room felt distant, almost unreachable. How could she be so at peace while he was struggling so deeply? Thomas exhaled slowly, hoping that with every breath he would find some sense of relief. But nothing changed. His journey felt endless, a path without an end. The Master Keiko watched Thomas struggle, her eyes calm yet perceptive. She walked over to him and knelt beside his cushion. "You are fighting yourself," she said quietly. "Peace cannot be forced. It is not something you find through will, but something you allow." Thomas opened his eyes slowly, his gaze meeting hers. There was no judgment in her expression, only gentle understanding. He felt a wave of vulnerability wash over him. Allow peace. He had spent so much time trying to grasp it, to chase after it, but it always felt just out of reach. "How do I stop fighting?" Thomas asked, his voice tinged with frustration. The Master Keiko smiled softly, her eyes reflecting an ancient wisdom. "By accepting that the fight itself is what keeps you trapped." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in days, Thomas felt a flicker of hope. Could it really be that simple? He wasn't sure, but something about her presence made him want to try. Thomas spent the next few days meditating with a new mindset, focusing on letting go rather than forcing his mind into silence. But the effort was no less difficult. Every time he tried, doubts crept in. Am I doing it right? His mind continued to race, and his frustration grew with each passing hour. One afternoon, the skeptic approached him. "Still trying to find peace in all that silence?" he asked, his voice laced with mockery. The skeptic, a 35-year-old male, was always quick to dismiss the Zen practices, preferring logic and reason over introspection. Thomas sighed, feeling the sting of the skeptic's words. "It's not working," he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. The skeptic smirked. "Of course it's not. You can't just sit and hope that everything will magically fall into place. You need action, something tangible." Thomas looked at him, the seed of doubt planting itself deeper into his mind. Could the skeptic be right? Was this path of silence and stillness really enough? That evening, after the skeptic's words continued to echo in his mind, Thomas wandered the temple grounds. He found himself near the koi pond, a place that always seemed to calm him. As he sat by the edge, Emma, approached quietly. She too had found her way to the pond for peace. "It's not about doing," Emma said, as if reading his mind. "It's about being. Sometimes we forget that Zen is not just about finding peace, but accepting the discomfort we feel." Thomas looked at her, intrigued. "I've been trying so hard to find it," he admitted. "I thought it would come if I just tried harder." Emma smiled gently, her eyes soft. That's the mistake. Peace can't be found by striving. You must first accept that you don't have it. Only then will it come. Her words settled into Thomas's mind like a seed ready to grow. Maybe this was the missing piece. The following day, Thomas returned to the meditation hall with a new perspective. He sat cross-legged on his cushion, breathing slowly and deeply, trying to embrace the discomfort in his mind. For the first time, he stopped fighting it. As the minutes passed, he felt something shift inside him. It wasn't the clarity he had been hoping for, but there was a quiet acceptance, a small space where his thoughts no longer controlled him. He allowed himself to feel the restlessness, but he didn't resist it. For once, he simply observed it, without judgment. The Master Keiko entered the hall and saw Thomas sitting there, his posture still but not rigid. She approached him slowly, her presence soothing, and nodded. "You have begun to let go," she said softly. Thomas opened his eyes and looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Maybe this is what it means to find peace, he thought. Not in perfection, but in acceptance. Thomas felt the weight of the world bearing down on him. Despite his efforts to embrace the teachings of Zen, the constant pull of external expectations continued to drag him away from his true path. His time at the temple was supposed to bring clarity, but now it felt like an illusion. The outside world, with all its demands, was creeping back into his mind. He was beginning to question whether this path was even meant for him. "Why am I here?" Thomas whispered to himself as he walked through the temple gardens, trying to find some peace among the flowers. But the faces of his family and the voices of those who had once held expectations for him echoed in his mind. They had all hoped for him to become something, someone great, someone successful. In their eyes, peace was only attainable through accomplishments. He couldn't escape the mounting pressure. The Master Keiko's teachings, though profound, felt distant, as though they were slipping through his fingers. Would he ever find what he was truly looking for? Or had he made a mistake in choosing this life? The Master Keiko had called Thomas to the hall that evening. "Nyan, you seem troubled," she said, her voice calm, as she observed him sitting in silence before her. Thomas let out a deep sigh, trying to push away the doubts that plagued him. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," he admitted, looking up at her, his eyes filled with frustration. "I feel like the outside world keeps pulling me away from what I've come here for. I'm being torn in two directions." The Master Keiko nodded, her expression soft but firm. "The world will always try to pull you. But your path is not about escape. It is about understanding what you are truly bound to." Thomas frowned. "But how do I ignore everything else when it keeps coming back to me? The expectations, the future, they're always there." She paused, then spoke gently. "You do not need to ignore the world, but you must learn not to be governed by it. The world's expectations are not yours to carry unless you choose to do so." Thomas felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. Choose to carry it, he thought, wondering if he had been carrying more than he realized. The following day, as Thomas went to the courtyard for his meditation practice, the skeptic approached him with a sly grin. "Still trying to meditate your way to peace?" he asked, his tone mocking. "You know, there are other ways to find success. Success is tangible. Zen seems so impractical." Thomas stood frozen, the words hitting him harder than he anticipated. The skeptic had always mocked the Zen path, but today his words felt different, more insistent, more convincing. "Why waste time with all this sitting and silence?" the skeptic continued. "You're not going to change the world by meditating. You've got to take action, become something more." Thomas looked away, feeling the familiar pressure of expectations creeping back into his mind. Is that all this is? A waste of time? His thoughts spiraled as he considered the skeptic's words. The world was full of action, of accomplishments, of measurable success. And here he was, still sitting in silence. Was he truly making progress? Or was he simply wasting his time? That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas sat by the koi pond, lost in thought. Emma walked quietly up to him and sat beside him, her presence calming. "What's on your mind?" she asked softly. Thomas sighed, glancing at the koi swimming gracefully in the pond. I feel torn, he admitted. The world keeps pushing me to do more, to be more. But the Zen teachings say to let go, to stop striving. I don't know what to do anymore. Emma smiled gently, her eyes soft with understanding. Zen isn't about doing nothing. It's about being present with whatever is. You don't have to choose between the two worlds, but you must learn to balance them. Thomas looked at her, confused. How can I balance them? It feels like I'm being pulled in two opposite directions. Emma's gaze shifted to the koi. Life will always pull you in different directions. But Zen teaches you to stay grounded, to remain yourself amidst all the forces that try to change you. Thomas watched the koi swim calmly in the pond, their movements effortless, and for a moment, he felt a small flicker of understanding. The next morning, Thomas found himself back in the meditation hall, sitting in front of the Master Keiko. His mind was quieter today, less resistant, but still filled with doubt. I've been thinking, he began, his voice hesitant, about what you said, about carrying the expectations of the world. The Master Keiko nodded, her gaze steady and kind. It's natural to feel the weight of the world, she replied. But you must understand, the world does not control you unless you allow it. You choose what you carry. Thomas's brow furrowed. But how do I choose? The world seems so demanding, so overwhelming. The Master Keiko smiled softly. You choose by understanding that you are not defined by what others expect of you. You are defined by your own path, by your own truth. Thomas exhaled slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. My own path, he thought, feeling a quiet resolve beginning to form within him. Maybe, for once, he could choose to let go of the world's expectations and live in the peace that Zen promised. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden hue over the temple grounds. Thomas, a 28-year-old male, had spent the morning in deep meditation. Something had shifted in him during his practice. For the first time, there was a sense of release, a breaking of chains that he hadn't even known he had been carrying. The Master Keiko's voice echoed in his mind, her words about surrender and letting go finally making sense. Thomas sat in silence, no longer pushing his thoughts away, but allowing them to simply pass through him. The world, the expectations, and the external pressures no longer felt like an overwhelming burden. Instead, they became part of the larger flow of life that he was now willing to embrace. It's not about escaping, it's about accepting, Thomas thought as he sat by the koi pond, his eyes focused on the calm water. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves. And for the first time, Thomas felt a sense of stillness within him that mirrored the tranquility around him. He was no longer at war with his thoughts. The Master Keiko's teachings were finally coming to life. Later that day, as Thomas walked through the temple grounds, he encountered the RE, a mysterious figure whose presence had always seemed fleeting, almost unreal. The RE, a 40-year-old gender-neutral figure, stood before him, eyes filled with an intense knowing. You've made progress, the RE said cryptically, but there is something you still don't see. Thomas, intrigued but cautious, asked, what do you mean? The RE's gaze intensified. You think you have let go of your expectations, but there's more you are holding on to. The words hung in the air like a riddle. Thomas frowned, unsure of what the RI was referring to. I've been trying to release everything, Thomas replied. What more is there to let go of? The RE smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in their eyes. You are still holding on to the idea of finding peace. Peace is not something you can find. It's something you realize. The words struck Thomas like lightning, a sudden realization dawning on him. Could it be that all his searching had been in vain? That peace was never something to be found, but something to be realized within himself? The skeptic found Thomas near the temple's edge later that afternoon. You still haven't learned, have you? The skeptic asked, his voice dripping with disdain. All this meditation and still no results. Why do you continue to chase something that's just not there? Thomas looked at him, his expression now calm, despite the irritation that bubbled beneath. It's not about chasing something, Thomas said slowly. It's about realizing that what I've been searching for has always been here. The skeptic scoffed. How can you believe that? How can you find peace in silence and stillness when the world demands action? You're being naive. But Thomas stood firm, the quiet confidence of his practice now showing. It's not about action or inaction. It's about understanding that peace isn't something to be earned. It's already here, waiting for us to accept it. The skeptic paused, his eyes narrowing as if to challenge Thomas's words. But Thomas could see a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Could it be that the skeptic, too, was beginning to question the material world's promises of fulfillment? That night, Thomas sat in the meditation hall, the weight of the Ari's words still fresh in his mind. Peace is not something you find. He closed his eyes, allowing the thought to settle. Could it really be that simple? He thought of all the years spent striving, chasing after something he couldn't even define. What if peace had always been there, quietly waiting for him to notice? For the first time, he wasn't trying to push his thoughts away or force them into silence. Instead, he let them be. The sounds of the wind outside, the faint rustle of the trees, and the distant hum of the temple's life all seemed to blend into the quiet rhythm of his breath. He wasn't trying to escape anything, he was simply present. The Master Keiko's teachings and the Ari's words finally connected within him. Peace wasn't something to be earned or found. It was something to be realized. A quiet realization began to bloom within him. He had always been whole. The following morning, Thomas stood at the temple's highest point, looking out over the vast landscape that stretched before him. The mountains, the trees, the river flowing gently below, all of it seemed so vast, yet in this moment, Thomas felt perfectly at home. The world no longer seemed like an overwhelming force. Instead, it felt like a part of him. The Master Keiko approached, her presence gentle but firm. "What have you learned?" she asked softly, standing beside him. Thomas took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon. "I've been looking for peace outside of myself," he said, "but it was always within me, waiting to be recognized." The Master Keiko smiled, her eyes reflecting a deep wisdom. "You are beginning to see," she said quietly. "Peace is not something that comes from outside, but from within. You have always been whole." Thomas nodded, a sense of clarity settling in his chest. For the first time, he was truly at peace with himself. Thomas stood at the edge of the temple grounds, staring out into the distance. It was early morning, and the world seemed to be holding its breath. The sky was a soft violet, the air crisp with the promise of a new day. Despite the peace he had recently discovered within himself, there was a quiet unease that lingered. For the first time, he realized that he had been holding on to the idea of peace as if it were something tangible to be attained. He had fought so hard for it, as if it were a destination. But peace, he now understood, was not something to achieve. It was something to surrender to. The tension in his chest had been with him for as long as he could remember. The struggle to be someone he wasn't, to live up to expectations that had never truly been his. And now, he felt the weight of it all. He was tired of fighting. He had fought for so long, not just against the world, but against himself. And now, he felt as though the only way forward was to surrender, to stop resisting. "Surrender," he whispered to himself. "Let go." Later that day, Thomas sat in the meditation hall, once again surrounded by stillness. But this time, it was different. The restlessness he had felt for so long was no longer present. Instead, he simply allowed the thoughts to come and go, not clinging to any of them. It felt as if the world had finally stopped asking him to be something else, and he could simply be. The Master Keiko entered the hall and approached Thomas, her steps soft but purposeful. "You've come far," she said, her voice gentle yet knowing. "What do you feel now?" Thomas took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "I feel empty, but not in a bad way. I feel like I've let go of everything I was holding on to." The Master Keiko smiled, her eyes shining with quiet approval. "That is the first step, to empty yourself of all that is not you." Thomas nodded, feeling a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't a sudden shift, but a quiet, profound realization that he was no longer struggling. He had let go, and in doing so, he had found peace. As the days passed, Thomas felt himself slowly surrendering more and more. Each day, he allowed himself to let go of the need to control, to push forward, and simply allowed life to unfold. He no longer searched for peace. It was already here. But with this surrender came a new challenge, the pull of the outside world, the expectations that still lingered. One afternoon, while walking through the temple gardens, Thomas encountered the skeptic again. "Still letting go?" The skeptic sneered, his voice full of disdain. "How long are you going to sit there waiting for something to magically change? You know the world doesn't stop for anyone." Thomas stopped and turned to face the skeptic, his expression calm. "The world doesn't need to stop. It's me who needed to stop fighting it," Thomas said, his voice steady. The skeptic raised an eyebrow. "So, you think letting go will change anything? The world will still demand things from you." Thomas smiled softly. "Perhaps. But I no longer feel the need to fight it. I've learned that peace doesn't come from changing the world, it comes from changing how I relate to it." The skeptic stood silent for a moment, his face unreadable. For the first time, Thomas sensed a shift. The skeptic wasn't mocking him, but rather he seemed curious. Later that evening, Thomas sat by the koi pond again, watching the fish swim effortlessly through the water. He had learned so much over the past few weeks, but something still felt incomplete. Was it possible to surrender fully? To let go completely? He closed his eyes, allowing the sounds of the pond to fill his ears, and for the first time he wasn't searching for anything. He simply existed. Emma sat down beside him, her presence calm and comforting. "You seem different," she said quietly, her voice gentle. "What's changed?" Thomas looked at her, his gaze soft. "I've let go," he said simply. "I've stopped fighting. I'm not searching anymore." Emma smiled, her eyes filled with understanding. "That's the way of Zen. To surrender not just to the world, but to yourself. To stop fighting who you are, and simply be." Thomas felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. Simply be, he thought, the words resonating deeply within him. He had spent so much of his life trying to become someone else, someone better. But now, he realized, he didn't need to be anyone other than himself. The next morning, as the sun rose over the temple, Thomas felt a deep sense of surrender. The world had not changed, but he had. The pressure, the expectations, the constant striving, they no longer held power over him. He had found a deep peace that was not dependent on circumstances. He was finally free not from the world, but from his attachment to it. As he walked through the temple grounds, the Master Keiko approached, her presence calm and unhurried. "You have learned much," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "But remember, the journey is never truly over. There is always more to discover." Thomas nodded, a soft smile on his face. "I understand," he said. "I no longer need to seek. I am at peace with where I am." The Master Keiko smiled gently, her eyes filled with knowing. "You have found what you were searching for, not through striving, but through surrender." Thomas walked through the temple grounds with a calm that felt foreign, yet natural. The wind was gentle, and the world around him seemed to breathe in harmony with his own. Each step was filled with acceptance. There was no longer a fight in him, no battle with himself or the world. He had finally found the peace he had spent so long searching for. It wasn't something he had to attain. It was simply something he allowed to unfold. This moment, this breath was enough. The Master Keiko approached Thomas as he stood by the stone well. "You have come far," she said. "But remember, peace does not mean the absence of struggle. It means the acceptance of all things as they are." Thomas nodded, her words ringing true in his heart. He had spent years searching for peace as if it were a destination, but now he understood. Peace was not found in the absence of struggle, but in the embrace of everything as it was, without resistance. As the days passed, Thomas found that peace was not a permanent state, but a way of being in the world. He learned to walk through each moment with presence, without clinging to the past or worrying about the future. Emma joined him one morning for meditation by the temple's edge. "It's not about being perfect," Emma said. It's about accepting your imperfection and finding peace within it. Thomas smiled, knowing she was right. The journey was never about achieving perfection, but simply about being present with what was. Thomas returned to the meditation hall, the space now familiar and comforting. He had come to realize that his practice was not about reaching an endpoint, but about the journey itself. He sat in the hall, reflecting on the teachings of the Master Keiko, the words of Emma, and his own path. He had surrendered to life, not by giving up, but by embracing it fully, without resistance. And in that surrender, he had found a freedom he had never known before. Thomas walked through the temple one final time before leaving, the peace within him now a constant companion. He was not the same person who had first entered this place, seeking answers, driven by a desire for success. Now, he understood that the journey had always been about surrendering to the present moment. As he walked along the stone path, the Master Keiko appeared beside him. "You have completed your journey," she said with a gentle smile. "But remember, true peace is never the destination, it is the journey itself." Thomas sat on a stone bench, overlooking the temple's expansive garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of purple and gold. He had come to accept that he would never have all the answers, but he no longer needed them. Peace, he realized, was not about solving life's mysteries, it was about living with them. As the gentle wind moved through the trees, Thomas allowed himself to simply be, letting the world exist as it was, without resistance. The Ari appeared before Thomas once more, their presence as enigmatic as ever. "You have come far," they said. "But remember, the journey does not end. It merely shifts form." Thomas smiled, understanding now. He had been so focused on the destination that he had missed the beauty of the journey itself. The Ari's cryptic words no longer confused him. He had learned to let go of the need for answers. "I understand," Thomas replied. "It's not about reaching an endpoint. It's about being present along the way." As Thomas wandered the temple's halls, he found himself alone in the quiet space where he had first encountered the Master Keiko. It felt like a lifetime ago. He had changed, but the stillness of the temple remained the same. He sat by the window, watching the wind move through the trees. There was no longer a sense of urgency, only a quiet knowing. The world would continue to turn, and Thomas would continue on his journey, but now he was content to simply be in the present. Thomas gazed out at the temple's vast landscape, the trees stretching into the distance. He had no destination in mind, no need to rush anywhere. His journey was ongoing, but it no longer felt like a quest for something elusive. He had found what he was searching for within himself. "I am not lost," he whispered, feeling the truth of the words in his bones. The wind carried his words into the quiet of the temple. Thomas was home. In the quiet of the temple, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thomas found himself standing in the same spot where he had first arrived. The journey had been long, but it had brought him here, to this moment of quiet understanding. "I am not lost. I am here," he whispered, his voice filled with a quiet resolve. The world had not changed, but he had. And that, Thomas realized, was enough. With a final breath, he embraced the moment, knowing that his journey was far from over.